So tent cities could pop up across the UK as rough sleeping is decriminalised, critics of the policy say. Very dry mouth, actually. So ministers have announced plans to repeal the Vagrancy Act by next spring, meaning it will no longer be an offence to sleep on pavements. Now, I mean, you look at Ireland, especially the last couple of years, and these tent cities, like, all along waterfronts, all along ferry streets, etc., etc. And it's, look, you know, we've got to be kind. Seriously. You know, you literally force upon a native population, people that don't share our values, that don't treat what we hold dear to us the same way, and are not, they have no problem taking various drugs, whatever else, litter everywhere, blah, 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 and being generally, by and large, a threat and quite a concern to most of the population. And remember, this has all been done deliberately because we don't know who any of them are. In fact, it's been encouraged. You can see it. You know, you've seen all the vids. They're literally mocking the rest of us, you know, throwing passports or papers or whatever. And of course, Tony Blair every now and again going, you know, we need a digital ID. You know, this will stop this uncontrolled immigration. It's all been deliberate and by design. And I still think, you know, while everybody's looking, and for good reason, at people like Ed Miliband, yeah. How about his brother, who, remember, for a good number of years now, has been head of an organisation that's been focused on the migration of displaced people, things like that. And I said it years ago, I see a point where he comes back into things, you know, after years of experience of dealing with, well, control crises. Yeah. No two doubts about it. But, and, you know, you could look even at cities like Edinburgh. I mean, I've noticed changes, and certainly not for the better. And, you know, as I've said in vids in the past, but, you know, more and more, you know, graffiti, all the rest of it, this is all sort of psychological warfare being manifested on the people. This is being played on the people. The doubts and the fears and the concerns and the drudgery and there's little to no joy. You know, as you can see, slowly but surely, your country's being turned into shite by people who masquerade as the righteous and say, look, you know, and if anybody's not up for this, well, they're right-wing, they're this, they're that, they're a bigot, they're a homophobe, they're a transphobe, they're a racist, they're a, you know, they've got plenty of words. None of them correct. Generally, people have genuine concerns about their own safety, about the safety of others, the safety of people that they care about, the genuine communities, yeah? The reasons why they live in a place, but that's why they're doing all this. Because remember, as a global city, look, just now you've got Masons galore with auctions abroad. And many of them feel they've got, well, options. And what I would say a lot of people have been programmed over the years, you know, these global travelers, you know, you see all these windswept and interesting dudes going to various places, and here I am on this airplane, how to get such and such, blah, 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 all the rest of it. But it ties into this global citizenship, you know, job on the go, you'll have to go where, and remember, this is part of the shredding of native Western societies, because it's not just about the destruction of the family, all of a sudden saying there's 1,000 genders and you can identify as whatever you like, and if anybody's not up for it, you know, or your child being indoctrinated into this from nursery school age, well, you're the problem. And it's not just the shredding of families and traditional family values, the things that made us so successful for thousands of years. It's about the shredding of everything from architecture, pubs, you name it, all things that people used to be quite tied to areas for all the right reasons, because not only family, extended family, communities, friends they'd known for decades, all the rest of all that. And, you see more of the introduction of gaming in the 90s, then the internet and gaming, blah, blah, blah. And then, their social life becomes more and more online, or, then the smartphone kicks in. And, people walking around with their heads in their phone as opposed to looking around genuinely and having a few concerns. The level of denial is phenomenal. Then think about property prices. And I mean, there's other stories, but, you constantly hear, oh, councils need to charge more. We need bigger, higher council tax bills galore. We need we've got this global nightmare called man-made climate change. They're quick to identify as sex when it's a demonizing. All part of the bigger picture. I mean, the complexity of this is utterly phenomenal. Yeah. But I think somewhere, and they keep saying Rachel from accounts. Yeah. But if anybody believes these puppets are running anything, seriously, what most people aren't looking at is the hardcore civil servants been there for decades, and various others that are within the civil service, the third sector, civil society, the councils. The ones that doesn't matter which set of fucking puppets you're sold on. Hey, it's Labour this time, or Conservative. It doesn't matter. It's the civil service and the networks behind that, honestly. Seriously. So, as, for example, 5% for the next 3 years, council tax, blah, blah, blah. Look at the bigger council tax bands, the higher bands. Houses that would normally sell, no problem, if you can afford to heat and, all the rest of it. But the added expense on top of that is this ever-increasing council taxes. And when you're looking at council tax, for example, bands, well, actually, D, E, F, G. I mean, my God. You go from F to G and to H. I mean, it's some serious dosh. Really, seriously. And add to that, no confidence in energy bills becoming cheaper, especially with Puppet Ed and charge supposedly, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, again, it's corporations and the civil service, etc., etc. And so there's pressure. It's harder to sell the larger houses over time in many areas. And, you add to that this, and what's that going to do? I mean, you've seen it. What we're told is refugees going into small villages, and they've doubled the population, and guess what? All of a sudden the houses are unable to sell, blah, blah. I mean, big houses. But if you were, and it's all just part and parcel of this rollout of Agenda 21, it'll become impossible for people to have a decent-sized house, or property at all, let's be honest, But they're hitting this from all angles, and it is part of the destruction of the West by these various underlying occultists that have a belief system that nobody seems to give a shit about, and they really should. And, I've mentioned various books lately, but I mean, even Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, and of course, I know I keep bumping on, but nobody seems to read it. Marlon Ferguson's The Aquarian Conspiracy, Personal and Social Transformation, blah, blah, blah. And I mean, it is, these people are calling for a new world order, one way or the other, seriously. And in this pursuit of a new Eden, but in order for that to happen, vast amounts of people need to go, seriously. So you get your assisted dying, you get your whatever. As our countries turn to shit by people masquerading as the righteous. Yeah, and when you think of what's been happening in Ireland as regards these tents, and what's happening in Ireland just now, you know, you're seeing more and more, well, highly pissed off locals, you know, vastly unhappy about the lack of safety in their country. Yeah. And that their own native people can't get home. And yet in these people coming, they're given everything, by and large. And then I don't think rural areas will be missed in this. Because going back to this about decriminalising tent city, rough sleeping, well, people will be focused about what's happening in the cities. Imagine how many of the rough sleeping aspect is in rural areas, or becomes the case. So even, you know, you can afford a decent house somewhere in the country, blah, blah, blah. Over time, you're going to have to be starting to be really concerned, especially if these houses are far apart, and normally the locals have been absolutely fine and knew each other, but as this changes, seriously. It's a complex subject, and as always, I could do a better job, but I just thought I'd do a quick vid on it. I mean, it's playing into this, like, really it is. Honestly, the apathy is astounding, but they really are putting us in harm's way. And so few people realise this. And I'll speak to you soon.